Hello, Bow. Hi, everyone. My name is Arshan Jones. I'm a senior content designer here at the Centre for Digital Public Services in Wales. And today I'm going to be talking about content. And this session is called It's Not What You Said, It's How You Said It. Now, what we're going to talk about essentially ways to improve your content. So why writing for your users in a way that they understand will improve your service, and how content design is about more than what we say, but how we say it. And we'll also be talking about why you should test your content. So how designing content is different from merely writing content or copywriting, as we may commonly refer to it. So ways to improve your content. We should always remember that users are affected by the way that we say things. So the language, tone, the accessibility, and inclusivity of our content. Our content can make or break a service, and we should always be looking, therefore, for ways to improve our content. So this is a kind of a summary of what we're going to cover today. Writing for user needs, finding which words your users are using, using plain language, structuring and formatting your content, writing inclusive and unbiased content, and one of my favorites, avoiding frequently asked questions. So let's get to it. Writing for user needs. You should always design content for a user need. This always makes sure that the content has a purpose and that it solves a problem for your users. So here's one user need example here. So user needs are often conveyed, once they're identified, they're conveyed as user stories. And here's an example of that user story. So as a student, I want to know what council tax reductions are available so that I can reduce my monthly outgoings. And that kind of user story can then guide everything you do during a project to improve some content or improve a service, just to make sure that you are completely focused on that user need. So where do user needs come from? Well, they come from user research, and I'm going to mention user research a few times in this session, but there are other videos available on the Centre for Digital Public Services channel which talk about user research, and I'd encourage you to go and have a look at those for a deeper dive into user research and hear from actual user researchers. But as a content designer, you can do your own desk research as well. If you have access to a user researcher, they can help you to do more in-depth research to find out what problems your users have and what support your users need to solve their problems. And once you've done this, you'll have those raw materials to start designing content. And one of those raw materials is that kind of user story. So this is how I explain really the main difference, I think, between writing content and designing content. Being a content designer means working from user needs. So two things as a content designer you should always do: research and think about the users. Now, you may be thinking about your users in your current role, even though you're not called a content designer. You might be working in content in your organization, but if you are researching what your users are doing, what their motivations are, then you are absolutely doing it right. And if you look anything like Pablo Escobar here, thinking about content, then you're probably doing it right, although you're allowed to have a smile on your face whilst doing it as well. So how about finding the words that your users are using? This one is really important. So by learning about the words and phrases that your users already use, you can create content in a relevant way that they can understand. Now, this helps you to do things like name your pages correctly so people can find your content, It also makes sure that you're using the same terminology that the user is familiar with and comfortable with. Now, this reduces the barriers to that content and to that service. Users don't need to think so hard when they're using your content. Now, the best way to hear and understand the language your users are using is by conducting our friend user research. Now, you can learn this in many ways. So things you can use research keywords such as Google AdWords, Google Search Console if you've got existing content. You can also use things like the data from a call center at your organization, and look into the words people are using on social media or forums around that specific subject. Now, going back to think about search, Google processes about 8.5 billion searches a day. So you can be pretty sure that looking at that data will allow you to see what language people are using when making a search, if you're using something like Google AdWords to do your research. Now, crucially, that kind of keyword research can also tell you if your content cannot solve a user's problem. Okay, so content can't solve every problem. Now, if people just aren't looking for that topic online, it's unlikely that the problem that user is facing can be solved simply by online content. There must be something else that they need as well. So that really guides you before you start creating content to think about whether that content really is going to solve that problem. Now, using plain language makes sure that you meet more users' needs because more people will understand your content. Now, in English, we call this often plain English. In Wales, in Welsh, we also have Cymraeg clir. Now, it has been explained like this as well, so that it's not dumbing down, it's opening up. Now, there's research to show that even experts prefer plain language about their expert subject matter as well. So, you know, this is not about making things so simple that it's dumbing down. It really is making it accessible to as many people as possible. So why would we use plain English? Why would we use plain language? Well, it is not about style. It's about helping users who have varied experiences, contexts, and abilities. So imagine when people are coming to your content, you know, what situations are they in? What are their backgrounds? Who are they? Again, our friend user research will tell us those things to some degree. But imagine people coming to your content under time pressure. Content which is simply written is easier to scan and absorb. People might be coming to content feeling stressed. When you're anxious, it's harder to absorb any kind of complex language. People might be multitasking with the divided attention. They might be caring for children whilst also trying to make some kind of application online. People might have a lower level of literacy or cognitive impairments, motor impairments, people who might be less fluent in a specific language, second language users, for example, not to mention people who might have certain levels of sight loss, those with autism or, you know, using sign language. You know, all these things are affected by how we write, and using plain language allows people with lots of different experiences, lots of different abilities, really to access that content at the same level. It really is about accessibility in that sense. So the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines do say that using the clearest and simplest language appropriate is highly desirable. So what this means in practice, well, you can do things like making sure that your average sentence is around 15 words long. The maximum sentence length really for a good level of understanding in the sentence is 25 words. If it's anything longer than that, consider splitting it up into 2 or 3 sentences or use bullet points. You should also avoid complex sentence structures. They are less easy to comprehend quickly than simple sentences, and understand them requires more cognitive effort than simple sentences. So I'm talking about the order of your verb and noun, the directness of the language, and avoiding kind of too many clauses in the same sentences. And if you talk a bit like Yoda, then please stop. Order your sentences in a natural way. Now, things you can do, well, yes, don't use idioms, cliches, jargon, slang, and euphemisms. So what we mean by these are, cliches being expressions that are so common and overused that they don't really have any real impact on your sentence. They're just fillers in your sentence. So jargon is a specialized, often technical language that is used by people in a particular field, profession, or social group. But that jargon often doesn't mean anything to anybody outside of that specialist field. Slang is the informal language of conversation, text message, and other casual social communication among friends. Euphemisms are milder words or phrases used to blunt the effect of more direct or unpleasant words or phrases. Now, if you avoid using these in writer, it will be clearer, more inclusive, and easier for people to understand. Acronyms then, well, you should use these sparingly. Now, in public sector services, there are a lot of acronyms, but it's really rare that people interacting with a service can understand acronyms when they are used. So Grammarly defines an acronym as a specific type of abbreviation that forms a pronounceable word from the first letter or syllable of each word in a phrase. For example, the word LASIK comes from an acronym for laser-assisted in situ keratomylosis. I think I've said that right. So only use acronyms when the acronym is more commonly known than the words that they stand for, because these are already easy to understand. So for example, BBC, laser, scuba, and radar. Avoid using any of the acronyms where possible, because again, it adds to the cognitive load for the person trying to understand the content. How about then structuring and formatting your content? Structuring and formatting your content can direct users to the content that's relevant and most important to them, saving them time on their daily task. So online, people read in different ways. Now, this often involves scanning to find the most relevant information for them. It very rarely involves reading the entire content of a page. Now, you'll see this slide here by the Nielsen Norman Group showing eye tracking software, showing where people have focused their attention on specific web pages. Now, there are many different kind of patterns that emerge, one of them being the F-shaped pattern that you can see on the left here. But these really are affected by the way that we design and present and write our content. People scan web pages, they don't read them word for word, and we shouldn't expect them to do that as content writers either. Now, public services obviously can often be complex with a lot of information, but there are things that we can do to simplify our services for our users. And one of those is only writing the content that the users really need to solve their problem. And here we're back talking about the user needs and the user story. So the things that a user really needs to solve their problem might not be everything that you think that they need. And everything else really is potentially internal for your organization and is about the process for you. So here's some other tips here for structuring content in a good way. So avoid writing walls of text. If your content looks like a wall of text, it needs to be broken up. Now, use subheadings to clearly break up your content and help people to navigate to the information that's relevant to them. So if you use the right words, the right keywords in your subheadings, and use those to break up your content, users who scan your webpage can easily find which bits of the webpage are most relevant to them. They will likely skip to those parts which you have labeled with subheadings. You can use bulleted lists or numbered lists as well, because these help to get to the point instead of having one big paragraph presenting a list of things. Use a bulleted list or numbered list to help guide the user and get to the point. And as we mentioned, use short sentences and paragraphs because these are easier to read and understand. It's important as well to write in an inclusive and unbiased way. This will make sure that you meet the needs of a diverse set of users. So it's easy to write from our own experiences and perspectives, but this can often make people who are not like us feel excluded by our writing. People can often be reading content in distress or anxiety. Now, as a content designer, I need to always remember that I am not representative of all my users, all the people who I write for. So when we write about people, we should not make any assumptions. Write for people's contexts. Okay, so when we write about a person or about people, find out as much as we can about their context so that we can fully understand and reflect their lived experience. A person's context may be related to their race, gender, or life experience. It can also be someone dealing with grief, mental health issues, or money worries. Our content affects people, and empathy is part of a content designer's job description. So now we get to frequently asked questions, or rather how we should use frequently asked questions. Why shouldn't we use frequently asked questions? Well, because they will really help you meet your user needs. They are often easier to write, but there's plenty of evidence to show that FAQs are not helpful for users. It's time-consuming for a user to read a lengthy list of questions. There's no guarantee that there is content that will answer their question. And FAQs often duplicate content that already exists somewhere else. And if there isn't an answer to the question, well, the user will have wasted a lot of time and be left very frustrated. So what is the alternative to frequently asked questions? If you're a content person and somebody tells you that you should add FAQs to the web page, what should you tell them that is better than frequently asked questions? Well, you can make sure that you find out which words your users are using. Use these in your content. This, alongside having a search function on your website, will make sure that your content can be found easily. So we move on to testing content. So for anyone working in content, testing is going to be your friend. If you're not testing, you are in reality using your best guess. Testing allows you to understand your users' ever-changing needs and how effective or ineffective your existing content is. So I'm going to talk about one type of testing, and that's usability testing, which helps you to understand how people use an existing product or service. Now, my first experience of this type of testing really was eye-opening. It really does force someone away from their way of thinking about their own content to truly understand what is the intention of the user. That is their motivations, their hopes, their fears, and how content is a barrier to them or supports them. And you will never again assume, I'm sure, that this will do. Now, I won't go into further details about this type of testing because, as I mentioned previously, there are other videos on the CDPS YouTube channel, which show some user research techniques, and usability testing is one of those. So please do go and check those out. So I want to leave you with an idea to go away with from this presentation. That would be some kind of call to action. Now, this is the idea. I want you to go back to your organization and talk about content design. Now, if you're a content designer, talk to people about the work that you do and about the benefits that you bring for your users and your organization. That might be quite challenging, but how about creating a little script for yourself and use this to guide yourself whenever you are starting to write for your colleagues and to show them what you do and how you can help the organization meet its goals as well. What else can you do today? Well, you can join our content design community here at CDPS. There are details of this content design community, which is growing very quickly on the CDPS website. Please do check it out. It'd be great to see you in our community of practice. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation today. You're welcome to get in touch with me, oshan.jones@thedigitalpublicservices.gov.wales.